Hello, everyone. This is Lynn Ferguson, partner at Social Impact Advisors. Thanks for joining us on the Impact Conversations podcast. Today, we're speaking with Agapi Gessesse. She is the Executive Director at C, that stands for Careers, Education, and Empowerment, the C, Center for Young Black Professionals. Agapi was born and raised in Toronto by her mother, a refugee from Ethiopia. It's this commitment to community development stemming from her lived experience that puts her in a great position to be doing the role she is now. She has, for over a decade, worked to enhance the lives of marginalized youth, including through her work with the Toronto Community Housing and the United Way of Greater Toronto. Her mandates have included that of a professional fundraiser, social enterprise manager, and coordinator of youth leadership. We're delighted to have Agapi speaking with us today about C, this Center for Young Black Professionals, where she's got a three-pronged approach of developing the Black social services sector, taking a real leadership role there, as well as focus on workforce development, creating jobs, identifying people to go into those jobs and stay in those jobs, particularly serving the Black community. And finally, policy, that there need to be policy changes if we're going to level the playing field and create a more equitable society. There's a big mandate here. Agapi shares it with enthusiasm and faces into the challenge, and I hope other organizations will join forces with Agapi in this work as allies, as funders, as supporters of this work, and that other 3B organizations, Black Focus, Black Led, and Black Serving, will also benefit reaching out in order to seek additional support to become strong organizations serving the Black community. There's lots to take in here. Have a listen. Hello, Agapi. We're so glad to have you joining the Impact Conversations podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Great to be talking about this. Okay, so let's get folks grounded first in your organization. How about a little thumbnail sketch of C?
Yeah, so C Center for Young Black Professionals exists to empower young people through social and economic empowerment, and we do that through careers, education, and empowerment.
Beautiful. Okay, and give us a sense of the size of your organization, if you could.
As an organization, we have about 20 staff, and we are scheduled to run 18 programs in 2021-2022.
Great. Okay. That just helps others, I think, who might be doing similar work gauge how you're able to do all the stuff you're doing when maybe they are facing challenges in doing it. Sometimes resources play a role, but it helps gauge some of that work. So terrific. Okay, so let's talk about the important work you're doing. As I understand it, you've got three main approaches. The first being around sector leadership, particularly around 3B organizations. What if we start there, and maybe we need to actually ground people in what we mean by 3B organizations?
Yeah, of course. Sector leadership is one of three pillars to our organization, and we really understand that 3B to be Black-led, which means your board as well as your leadership are Black folks. Mm-hmm. Black serving, meaning that you are mandated to work with Black communities. And Black focus is understanding that you have culturally relevant programming. So that's what we talk about when we're talking about 3B organizations. And through our sector leadership, we really acknowledge that we've been doing this work for a very long time. We have an expertise when it comes to working with Black youth in particular. We have a 92% retention rate. And so how can we create an opportunity for grassroots organizations and emerging organizations, which we were once one of them, not too long ago. We actually only received our charitable status in 2018. So how can we think about what we needed as we were grassroots, then becoming an emerging organization, and now not even that quite established, but establishing ourselves? How can we be able to support 3B organizations that are doing this work on the ground and help them build their infrastructure and their resources and their capacity building to be able to take advantage of opportunities that are coming down the pipeline, such as funding? Part of the work that we're doing is in partnership with NAPSI, the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities. And we're really vested in understanding how we can create kind of a gold standard for the Black community, because we acknowledge that there's a Black social service sector made up of 3B organizations, and then there are the larger social service sector. And so how can we create opportunities and build the capacity of these organizations so that they can play on the same field as the rest of the social service sector? Because the work that we are doing is so important. And because Black communities are so disproportionately represented in all of the wrong places, we want to be able to equip organizations that have the solutions and have the cultural lens to be able to provide the services that are needed to our community in a well-resourced way.
Great. Yeah. So capacity building and specifically to meet the needs of the Black community and the Black social services sector.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And thanks for taking a step back and talking through the 3B label that's being used a lot now, which is great, about Black led, Black serving, and Black focused. It hadn't actually occurred to me that Black led should include the board. And so that is a great thing to call out, that there's more to it than just the executive director or the CEO of the organization, but it's really from the top down.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that the work at the City of Toronto through the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Department has done a study that showed that I believe only 4% of boards have Black people on them. And so that's an area that is important. I mean, the majority of your board should be comprised of Black folks rather than 100%. I think allyship is important, but yeah, we are underrepresented at a board level as well. And I think that's, Taibu Community Health Center is also doing some capacity building with community members around that to address that as well.
Terrific. Yep. And that's getting quite a bit of attention right now. I think looking at the diversity of boards, that as we talk about as a society needing to be more diverse, that certainly nonprofit boards are a place to start to perhaps more easily make change than staffing changes that don't happen quite as frequently, that there's an opportunity for the nonprofit sector to take some leadership there. And it would seem that the Black social services sector, as you've called it, could particularly take a lead there.
Yeah, completely.
Great. Okay, so no small feat to be doing capacity building for you in this space. It is but one of your pillars, as we've said. So you've got another pillar around soft skills development, if I've got that right. Tell us how that fits in.
Yeah, I think that's more around our programming. And so I think that what makes us unique is we take 3 really distinct approaches to our programming. We really focus on workforce development. How can we get Black youth who are often at the back of the unemployment line to either the middle or the front? And the best way for us to do that is to identify labor gaps. So we look at where evidence and data leads us in terms of where the labor gaps are, also looking at industries that have severe diversity issues that they have publicly said that they want to address. And so we look at industries that we can train young people with the skill that they can then turn into a 9-to-5, become a freelancer, become an entrepreneur, whatever it is that's going to allow them to have a steady income. So we do this work from 3. We love things in 3s, clearly, but we do it through 3 very distinct approaches. Number 1 being trauma informed, acknowledging that Black people, by virtue of being in existence, have direct correlation with anti-Black racism, deal with trauma. And so those traumas can be compounded by life experiences by the time someone shows up to our door. And so we have full-time psychotherapists on staff so that the young people can take advantage of that if they need it. The second approach is what we call a person-centered approach. People in the social service sector might call it wraparound supports, but we like to call it person-centered. Taking a 360-degree view of a young person's life. Who are your friends? Who are your family? What does your food security look like? What does your housing security look like? What is your life stabilization? And what will you need in programming with us? And also, as you transition into the workforce, what are the things that you might need from us in order to become successful? And so we have full-time social workers who are on staff, MSWs that work with those young people to be able to address any needs that they need and come up with a plan. And then the third approach that we take is culturally relevant. Everything that we do is in the context of being Black and in Canada. And the Black community is very diverse in our makeup and our religion, where we come from in the world. But one thing that does tie us all together is a Black identity. And so whether you're a newcomer, you're a first or second generation immigrant, we really are able to focus on the Black identity and what that means. So we deal with the good, the bad, and the ugly of being Black in Canada and entering into the workforce. And that's really what we do around our programming. And that's really the first, I would probably say, pillar to what we do here.
So many good things there. So certainly we work with other groups who are dealing with what might be called workforce-led or demand-led employment. So identifying where there's job potential and make sure that the training or supporting people in those roles is targeted where those opportunities are, which makes a lot of sense. And also find that the barriers are not just in getting those jobs, but in keeping those jobs. And so where you're talking about the person-centered or wraparound services, terrific that you are identifying it's not just about the job, but what other supports are needed, foundational things like access to food or transportation to get people to the jobs and make them successful when they reach those opportunities.
Yeah, completely.
Great. Okay. And of course, the culturally relevant lens. Then do you find there's also needs to be work done on the other side, on the employer side of things? So it's one thing, I mean, great to identify, as you've said, those organizations or industries where they have already called out that they're looking to increase their diversity. But are there things to be done to help people be successful in those roles on the employer's side?
Oh, completely. I often say the young people who come through our programs, they're doing the work. They've shown up. Most of our programs last at least 21 weeks. They've taken the time and the investment in becoming the best employee that they can be as they enter into the workforce. So the onus also is on the employer to meet them at the door. What is their work environment going to be like once they enter into that workplace or that industry? Is that a welcoming environment? Because nobody wants to be somewhere where they are clearly not wanted. If you invite someone over for dinner and you ask them to come and enjoy a meal with you, but when they show up, there's no seat for them to sit at and there's no placemat. You know, you're going to feel uncomfortable and want to leave, especially if everyone starts feasting on the amazing food and you have no plate. Right. So at the same time, employers really need to think about, you know, it's not business as usual and we can't do things the way that we have always done them. You need to start thinking about the new wave of folks who are coming into the workforce and the fact that our country's makeup is changing and we're a lot more diverse than we once were and definitely more diverse for particular industries. And so how are you creating an inclusive environment for people to be able to want to work here and stay there? It's one thing to get a job. It's another thing to stay there. And so employers have an equal responsibility with these young people to create an environment that is inclusive and that allows them to be able to bring their entire self to their work.
Right. And better for everybody if those end up being long-term employees for both the employee and the company, if that's how that works out.
Completely. Yeah. Diversity equals more dollars. There's a lot of proof that tells us that companies that have diverse leadership, for instance, are 19% more profitable than those that are not.
Yes.
So diversifying your workforce is not a nice thing to do because it's a nice thing to do. It actually is beneficial to you, but different perspective, different talents are going to help your bottom line. So I think people also have to steer away from thinking that it's a favor you're doing to racialized groups. It's actually going to benefit you in the long run.
Right. In the organization's best interest, for sure. Yes. I wonder if you might tell us more specifically about one of those programs, perhaps in the hospitality industry.
Yeah, so we run a program called Kitchen Masters, and it helps young people learn how to enter into the culinary arts. So we do that program. It's our longest standing program. We've ran it for the last 7 years now. And so that has been a really great opportunity and a really great example of young people obtaining a skill and then being able to become entrepreneurs after the fact. All of our programs come with placements because we definitely believe you need to be able to work for somebody before you work for yourself. But entrepreneurship is something that we very heavily encourage our young people to do. And Kitchen Masters is one of the programs that we've seen the most amount of skills training take place. And then that has led to entrepreneurship.
Great. And does that also present another opportunity for C, that Kitchen Masters program, from the opportunity to kind of leverage perhaps what you've been learning and share that with others?
Yeah, for sure. I think that all of our programs have what we call C Essentials tied to them. And it's really a suite of modules that are soft and hard skills that allow for us to choose according to what the program is and its suitability, but really things that people just you're not going to learn it in school, right? So on a hard skills standpoint, what is an HST number and when do I apply for it and why do I need it and how do I pay it? how do I register a business? How do I create an invoice if I've done work for somebody? Down to, more soft skills like rise and rest. How do you prepare yourself the night before you have to go to work for a successful day the next day?
Great. And are you finding some other nonprofits have interest in this sort of approach and perhaps learning from you?
Yeah, we actually are in the process right now of really helping other organizations adopt the curriculum that we have. We're looking for 3B organizations across the country that are doing workforce development with youth and might be either a grassroots or emerging organization, because one of the hardest things to get funded for is to really build infrastructure, right? Like funds to build an entire curriculum. And so how can we equip these organizations that are serving Black youth? We're not really interested in creating C centers across the country and going to Montreal and planting a C center for young Black professionals there. But what we are interested in doing through our sector leadership is really looking at how can we help other organizations that are already doing really similar work to us and they're doing it really well. How can we help enhance the work that they're doing by providing them with this curriculum so that they can become a sister organization for us, so that if there is young people from Montreal that reach out to us, there's an organization called Desta that we are partnering with right now to pilot what this could look like in Montreal. But again, also understanding that every Black community, the barriers are different, the community makeup is different. So we're working with a couple of organizations across the country on how we can adapt our curriculum so that it does speak to most communities and their diversity across the country. And then they're going to pilot it and see if it works in their communities and if they're going to be able to garner the same type of results that we're seeing here at C.
Great. And certainly the evaluation of that is always important and another part that tends to have challenges in getting funded.
Yes, evaluation is so important, especially when we are talking about Black communities, because there's so few resources in terms of collecting data in this country. I mean, one thing that America does really well is collect race-based data. Canada, we're just slowly coming to that realization. And again, it takes time to collect that data. And so for 3B organizations, it's so important for us to be able to evaluate the work that we're doing and the long-term impacts in our community, because really there's no external sources for us to really pull from to say, this is the Black Canadian experience and this is the data that's showing us. It's really organizations and small studies in particular communities that are really creating a case of support for us. So evaluation is so key to the work that we're doing.
Great. And great that you have built that in and taken that on, although not without its challenges, I'm sure. But good to be doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So lots going on. So looking at the sector as a whole and capacity building there, and then you've got your direct programming. And then is there a policy piece here also?
Yes. So we have a policy strategy that really helps us tackle policies that we have seen firsthand are prohibiting our young people from upward mobility. So we have policies at a municipal, federal, and provincial level that we would like to see come to fruition. So at a provincial level, we're really, really invested in looking at how can we help with social assistance reform. 30% of the programs that we run are for young people who are on social assistance. And we have seen that the clawbacks for folks who are on social assistance deeply affect our ability to even support them financially. Most of our programs come with stipends. Our programs that are for folks who are on social assistance, we're actually unable to provide them with that, because if you make more than $200, for every dollar you make, 50 cents of your social assistance check is taken away. And so for a single person living in the city of Toronto who might be receiving $565 a month, which, for those of us who live in the city know, where are you going to live with that?
Yeah.
You're going to be behind on your bills, even if you do find a job. So, if there's no leeway time for somebody to really be able to catch up on their bills, really start to stabilize their life, then the likelihood of them falling back into that trap is very high. So we're really looking for policy change in that so that we are giving people a fair chance to successfully transition off of social assistance and into the workforce.
Great. And do you find that's the kind of thing, Agapi, that you need to work with other organizations on? Are others interested in seeing policy change and lending their voice to that also? Do you know at this stage?
For sure. We need, outside of even, this is something that affects all races, all creed. And it's also, we see this for folks who are on ODSP as well, right? So this is a perfect example of how we all can come together as allies of each other to really encourage the government to do the right thing. You know, I understand that we want to save money, but we also need to look at what saving money in the long term looks like versus spending now to save later. And I think that the only way that advocacy really works is power in numbers. So the more organizations that are experiencing these challenges that come together and lobby government, I think the better results we'll see and the faster.
Yeah, and certainly an issue affecting lots of folks, yes, and that many organizations would care about. Okay, and there's more.
Well, yeah, that's at a provincial level. At a federal level, we're really looking at how much it costs to receive a pardon in Canada. So part of the work that we do in our person-centered approach is also looking at what are some of the barriers to employment. And for some young people who have been in conflict with the law, it's that they have been in conflict with the law and that's on their record. And so helping them find employment can become very hard. But in Canada, in 2012, it used to cost $50 to receive a pardon. We're now in 2021 and it costs $720. And that's just for the fee. So if I'm a young person, and we've seen this time and time again, if you're a young person, you cannot find employment because you have been in conflict with the law. Mm-hmm. The likelihood of you having $720 for an application fee just to start is very slim. And also the system navigation that's needed for you to figure out how you can even go about that is very hard. And so we really want to encourage government to take those barriers off. We would like to see a change in this drastically. Number one, the wait time is 7 to 10 years, depending on the crime that has been committed. So bringing that time down for young people who might have made mistakes earlier on in their life would be great, as well as once the time lapse has taken place, that it should automatically be abolished off of their record, and that they shouldn't have to go through so many hoops and system navigation for them to be able to obtain a pardon. So that's what we're really looking and encouraging the federal government to take a look at in terms of folks who have been in conflict with the law and their ability to rehabilitate and to bring the recidivism down. We're not interested in being overly represented in the justice system.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. So big things and important to make policy change, although lots of groups tend to shy away from policy change. Why is it that C thinks it's so important to do this advocacy work?
Well, we can have the best programs we'd like.
Yeah.
We can try our best. But if there are external factors that are prohibiting our young people from upward mobility, then it could all be in vain. So if we're not looking at this at a holistic level and understanding that we need to create an ecosystem where corporations, government, as well as the not-for-profit sector all have a role to play, then we're actually not going to be able to address the overarching policy that we're addressing on a daily basis, no matter what we do in our organization, which is the fact that anti-Black racism exists. And it exists in institutions, it exists in society, et cetera. So how are we going to be able to abolish that? By really bringing to government's attention where they are not helping and where they have a responsibility to take barriers down so that they can create a safer country for the rest of us, create better opportunities economically so that everybody can work, and that anti-Black racism is not so prevalent in our society and that we're leveling the playing field.
Yep, make it more equitable. Yes. Okay, right. So there's a bit of a moment happening right now, maybe a bit of a silver lining with COVID and everything that's been going on in the world, but there certainly seems to be a heightened interest in supporting Black communities and addressing some of the racial inequities. How do you make the most of this moment? How do you make it not just a moment, but more of a movement, something embedded in the thinking of nonprofits, the philanthropic sector, employers? Does C have a role in all of that?
I think that we're working with our corporate partners, we're working with the foundations that are willing to work with us and some who have been with us for a really long time. We're doing our part and we're trying to share whatever information that we can through the recovery report that we're going to produce out of our sector leadership is really going to be around, in partnership with NAPC, is going to be what recovery is going to look like for Black communities. And we're here to equip these stakeholders with the information that they need in order to best support Black communities, because it will come from our community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the role that we want to play and that we have been playing.
Great. And certainly the idea of having a recovery report, there are lots of recovery reports out there and all important things, but to have it from the perspective of the Black community, directly hearing from the community, sounds like a great initiative to be undertaking.
Yeah. And I think what I love most about that is that we're actually taking the recovery reports from the city, from the province, assessing it and going back to community and saying, is this going to work for us? Like, this is what everyone else's plan is. Is this going to work for us? And what is this supposed to look like? What does this mean to us in the context of everyone else's plan? So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah. Applying the lens of the Black community to make sure we've still got the right solutions. Yeah. Great. Yeah. And perhaps some additional ones will be needed.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So overall, Agapi, how are you measuring success for the organization or the impact it's making?
I mean, I think there are many pillars to it. And so I think under programming, I think we're really looking at our retention rate. We're looking for generational change. So at the 2-year mark, at the 5-year mark, and at the 10-year mark, how are we able to empower the young people to create a better environment and lifestyle for themselves so that they can then in turn provide a better life for their children and their families? And I think under sector leadership, I think what we're really going to be able to take a look at is how many grassroots and emerging organizations are able to grow and thrive and be able to have resources over the next 3 years. How are we going to be able to build their governance, their financial framework, and how we are working with funders to create a more equitable process? I think for sector leadership, that's really what we're going to be looking at, and how the Black social service sector starts to integrate itself into the larger sector, because right now it's very separate. And so how those are the types of things that I think that we're going to start to measure. And then under policy, I think we're starting with these policies that I talked to you about. And I don't think we'll let up until we see some change there. And to some folks' credit, we have seen some changes over the last couple of years, but we're not there yet. And so I think policy work takes time. And I think we're committed over the next at least 5 years to see those things through.
Yeah. And some people are feeling like now in this time of uncertainty and time of change that perhaps there is an opportunity to move policies more quickly than people previously might have thought possible. So hopefully that applies in this situation too.
Completely. Yeah. I think COVID has taught us that nothing is impossible. If the circumstances and the pressure is there, COVID put some pressure on us and we had to pivot and figure it out. And I think we have a very unique opportunity to come out of this pandemic and figure out how we're going to create an equitable society and renew our social contract with each other. And I think this work is all a part of that.
Great. Yes. So lots going on here. There must be so many demands on your time. Certainly the Black community and supporting Black lives is a hot topic for employers and the philanthropic sector. And you've got lots on your plate with C and then supporting other B3 organizations. I'm guessing you're also a voice for the community, perhaps just like right here on this podcast, and you're on a number of advisory councils and collectives, which is how we have connected. How do you find the time and how do you decide what to give your time to?
Yeah, in all honesty, I think I'm still figuring that out. But I don't think any one person speaks for the Black community. I can only speak from my own experiences, but I do think that we're in a unique time in history. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that not even just myself, there's so many other amazing leaders in the Black community that are giving of themselves. And I think the time is now. And I think what I'm telling myself is the more I can get people to listen, the more allies will come on board and they will echo my thoughts and our community's needs. And it will spread like wildfire. But I do think, I'm sure if we speak to any Black leaders right now, a lot of us are stretched, but I truly do believe that it will be very, very worth it. And I think that we're raising up a generation of young leaders that have no interest in repeating the negative history of our past, but to create a new norm and a new structure that they want to see. And so I'm very empowered by that.
Terrific. And I'm sure are empowering others in the work that you're doing. Great things undergoing here. Agapi, thank you so much for taking time today to share this with our listeners and me in particular. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, just thank you for listening. I think this is an important conversation. Thank you for having me. And I think more of these conversations need to be had. And I just appreciate you giving me the platform.
Absolutely. A pleasure having you here. And we hope to hear more from you and continue the conversation. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Take care. I'd like to thank Agapi for joining us today. It was great to be talking about support for the Black community and what needs to be done. Their very intentional approach about providing that kind of support and how we can all play a role in supporting that also. To learn more about C, Center for Young Black Professionals, and their work, do check out our show notes on our website. We'll also have links there to additional resources. You can also find out more about our work at socialimpactadvisors.ca. If you like this episode of Impact Conversations, please rate and subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you like to tune in. It does help other listeners find us, and that's what this is all about. Spreading the word about making a real impact in the nonprofit sector in Canada. Please join us in spreading that word. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon.